Hello. Welcome to part 3 of this 7-part video series on a parent's guide to getting the most from ABA therapy. These videos are supplementary to my book, 7 Days to Clarity. If you haven't already, go back and watch parts 1 and 2 so that way you can be up to date. They go in order, and so you'll need the information from the previous ones. So I'll meet you back here if that's the case. If you already watched parts 1 and 2, thank you so much. Chances are you're probably a little triggered, and I'm sorry. I know that that's uncomfortable, but I wouldn't do that to you if I didn't think it was going to be in service of your vision, which I told you in the first video I was going to end up being like a broken record with that, that phrasing, that saying. But in the first video, we did a balance assessment, right? We created your values, which is going to be like your roadmap, your values list, and we made a kind of tangible, written down version of your vision for some clarity. And the second one, I asked you to take all of that and turn your vision into goals and put those goals into a tiered chart, because when we start referencing the prioritization and the breaking down of our vision into goals that are both observable and of feeling, right? How you feel is important here. That's when we can start making the progress towards that vision. But we can't necessarily expect ourselves to start making progress until we start addressing some of the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings that come along, or beliefs that come along with that vision. Because inherent to this whole process so far is some level of discomfort, because it's while we're drawing attention to something so fun and exciting to create, it also inherently means that we're not experiencing that now. And there's always feelings that go along with that, because if we're not experiencing something that feels uncomfortable, something that we want, there might be some guilt, there might be some shame, there might be some fear, there might be some beliefs around what is possible, what is achievable, what is realistic in comparison to what you're experiencing. And when we have those kind of like discrepancies, a lot of the times we stop even following that path at all. We stop even trying to create our vision because we have a belief that there will be an unachievable outcome. And then when we believe that, it becomes true. If we believe it's an unachievable outcome, we won't make progress towards it, because we won't interact with our environment or our thoughts and feelings in a way that is conducive to progress. We won't try. But when we start questioning the beliefs that we have, we start making progress. We interact with our environment differently. We challenge the way that we interact with our resources now. We get creative and we try out different ways, and then that will inevitably create a different outcome in the long term. And it might not be the exact outcome that we set out to achieve, but it will probably be progress, and it might even be better. So how do we go about getting started with that? Well, the first part is to make space for discomfort to be safe. That's one of the reasons that I have you guys spend so much time thinking about your self-care and the way that you are going to look at your whole life from a macro level rather than a hyper-focused level. Because when we start pouring into ourselves and allowing us to have lives that aren't only for our children and that are also for us, It allows us to tolerate discomfort in a completely different way. It allows us to start doing things that are hard, thinking about things that are hard and uncomfortable and triggering, so that we can start that whole process of interacting with our environment differently. And when you know that you're going to get your needs met, right? That you're going to have some free time, that you're going to be able to eat the foods you want to, or talk with people who you value spending time with, or doing activities that help you to reset and recharge, then it's easier to do the hard stuff. And that is also going to translate into how you interact with your child's therapy, therapists, and therapeutic environments. So now that hopefully I've drilled in the idea of filling up your cup, and that you belong in the prioritization of tasks. Like, it's not just your kids, it's also you. It's not just your family, it's also you. And whatever that means for you matters. Now we're going to start looking at your limiting beliefs. So when I think about limiting beliefs, it usually comes down to some of the big emotions that are uncomfortable that people want to get away from. Fear, shame, guilt, and then some other stuff that kind of fall in there, right? Like bitterness, resentment, frustration, overwhelm. Those usually are tertiary to the, that's not, maybe not the right word, but separated from or a part of those big three. Selfish is another one. Selfish is a big one for parents, especially, I know. And so when we start thinking about how those things play into our decision making, how those things play into our belief systems, then we can start questioning if it's true and if it's helpful. The next part is to be able to start thinking about where these beliefs came from. And so what I'd like you to do is take that tiered goal list that you have, or even just your regular dump goal list where they're all just kind of all over the place, higgledy-piggledy. Pick a few that are meaningful to you. And I want you to start just writing down your beliefs about that goal and its achievability and its possibility and how you just feel about it. And write down like the beliefs and stuff that come from, like where they come from. Ask yourself that. Is this belief mine? Or is this belief something that my parents used to say? Is it a colloquialism that people just say all the time? Like, money doesn't grow on trees. And so therefore there's the inherent belief that money is challenging to achieve, right? And that's probably a triggering one. I shouldn't have used that as an example, but it's an easy one because most people have heard it. And so if we have that belief, we're not going to go about, like, we're going to think that all money is hard to get to, and then it will be true. But when we start thinking about it in a different way is when we start coming up with creative solutions. We're going to do the same thing with whatever your goals are. And so just pick a few and write down all of the beliefs that your parents said, that your teachers said, that you've heard said, that people say, and that might be influencing how you think about those things. And then if there's feelings in that, right? If there's stuff that brings up shame or guilt or frustration, fear, resentment, bitterness, anger, all that stuff, ask yourself if you're resisting these feelings. Sorry, I'm getting kind of some bad light here. Ask yourself if you're resisting feeling any of these feelings. And why, right? Because truly our brains are wired to help us save ourselves from discomfort, right? But when we don't process the discomfort and we just set it to the side, then it prevents us from being able to use it as an opportunity for change. And in the next video, we're going to do the restate and reframe. okay? But this video is about acknowledging that being uncomfortable and that experiencing discomfort can be safe. And it's hard. It's so hard because the things that we're talking about, our babies, our families, mean so much to us. And that's why the emotions are so big. That's why it's so triggering. That's why it's so uncomfortable. Because when we think about it, this is everything. And when we start making space for there to be progress and discomfort in the process of progress, that's when we start really opening the door to creating the life that we want. When we keep the door closed to feeling discomfort at all, we can't get the information that discomfort is going to share with us. And there is information. So if we're thinking about something like this procedure is not working. I don't like it. I don't feel good about it. I don't want to do this anymore. And underneath, there's the fear that it won't work. And so you're looking for ways in which it doesn't work. And then it doesn't work because we're looking for ways in which it can't work, right? Then we rob ourselves of the opportunity of even seeing if it will. And that's really hard to sit in, right? It's really hard to sit in that place of letting yourself possibly being let down again, right? Letting yourself worry if you've made the right decision. But when we also lean into that, using our values list, using our goals, and we start asking those, the uncomfortable feelings, we feel them, we start asking them if they're helpful and service of our vision, and if they have to be true. And the true one is where we start getting into the reframing. But right now it's about, what can I get from this information? What is the underlying thing? And giving yourself some safety. So the next part of this is, I want to feel like I'm making the right decision, and I'm not sure if I am, right? Then you get to be really careful about how you take your data, how you notice situations. Are you expecting it to go wrong? Are you expecting it to go right? Can I evaluate either of those positions, noticing that that's my urge, and get practice separating from the emotion eventually. But in order to separate from the emotion, we have to let ourselves feel it. And this might not be making sense yet because I'm introducing a lot of topics here all at once. And they're intertwined, and that's challenging, right? And it's not necessarily gonna be any easier in any other situation. But the idea of being able to allow yourself to feel your feelings, to notice the information that they tell you, is a skill. It's a really big skill. So some of the ways that I recommend practicing this skill is I do journaling. I write down, like I asked you to do with the tiered, write down all the tiered goals list. Write down all of your beliefs. Notice the ones that might not be yours. Ask yourself if you want to keep them, if they're helpful. And then as you go through your day, start noticing how that belief is limiting you, right? And notice if there's anything else underneath the discomfort, right? Because when you start leaning into it, you find those limiting beliefs and then you bust them, and then you're able to make progress. And it'll be uncomfortable, because breaking a habit of thought and feeling is just as uncomfortable as breaking a habit of action. And it takes the same things, yet just repetition, noticing you're doing it and choosing to do something else, choosing to say, like, this thought, this feeling, this belief that I've held for a long time is no longer one that I want to have. But the way to get there is by feeling the feeling, letting it be safe to feel the feeling, and wading into that space of discomfort with an open heart. And I hate leaving you here like this. And I'll get to the reframing, where we get to start making space to create change for that. But it's so important to just sit with your feelings. So the ones that you chose to write down, and you wrote your limiting beliefs, write all of their heart into that. Write it out on that piece of paper, how you feel about that, and what you're afraid of, and where that comes from, and keep going. I'll help you turn it into something productive in the next video. But right now, just spilling all of the things, the fears, out onto the paper is your task. You only have to do it with a few. Probably there's going to be a lot of overlap, and you'll want to go back and do some of these another time. But if we just start with a few, and you get a feel for the process, like 2 or 3, and we start making some progress in that process with those first ones, it'll give you a little bit of reason to go back and to do the other ones. And again, the reason that we're leaning into this discomfort is in service of your vision, right? When we start allowing ourselves to wade into the discomfort around our limiting beliefs, our fears about what we want to create, and we start working with them to create them to be more flexible, then we can start interacting with our environment differently to create what we want to create. So there's a reason that we're doing this. And so let's create some safety in those feelings. And again, if you aren't getting your needs met on a regular basis with self-care, this is probably going to be really hard. And so creating a ritual of self-care first, before we start wading into some of this really uncomfortable work, is going to be important. So make sure you have empathy for the process. It's okay to be uncomfortable. And let's start leaning in. I'll see you for part